Hi, where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments.
The sound of rain against the window pane of room 214 was not a romantic backdrop. It was a rhythmic, mathematical reminder of moisture seeping into structural gaps that the management of Golden Vistas long-term care facility had no intention of fixing. In the lexicon of corporate elder care, this was designated as deferred maintenance. In reality, it was a deliberate calculation. Old walls for old people, with the capital budget systematically allocated to the glossy brochures and the landscaped entrance rather than the structural integrity of the residential wards. I sat on the narrow edge of the bed, the mattress compressed by 7 years of my own 72-kilogram weight into a permanent, uncomfortable hollow for which it was difficult to rise. My hands, thick-jointed and permanently stained near the cuticles with the faint gray residue of carbon paper and permanent blue ink, rested flat on my knees. For 38 years, my title at the Municipal Records Office had been Senior Registrar of Titles, Liens, and Encumbrances. It was a position that existed entirely in the gray, dust-choked spaces of local bureaucracy, far beneath the notice of ambitious politicians, yet completely essential to the daily mechanism of the city's real estate market. In public administration, there is a well-documented concept known as informational asymmetric power. The mayors changed every 4 years, arriving with loud campaigns and leaving with quiet scandals. The developers came and went in perfect synchronization with the 12-year economic cycles, building glass towers that they would default on during the subsequent recessions. But the registrar remained. I was the person who knew which specific parcels of land in the downtown core had unresolved probate disputes dating back to the flu epidemic of 1918, which commercial zones were secretly constructed over shifting, subterranean marshland, and whose grandfather had forged the signatures on the original clearing deeds for what was now the wealthiest suburb in the county. I was not a spy, a whistleblower, or a shadow tycoon. I was simply a filing clerk who had spent half a century paying absolute attention to the handwritten notes in the margins of public documents. My daughter, Clara, stood near the small, laminate particle board wardrobe that smelled of industrial adhesive and damp clothes, sorting through my winter cardigans with an efficiency that bordered on the clinical. She was 42, a senior asset manager for a mid-tier estate planning firm, a woman whose entire professional existence was predicated on the orderly, cold transfer of property from the dying to the living. She approached my room not as a space of comfort, but as an optimization problem that required an immediate solution. "We need to radically consolidate these, Evelyn," Clara said, her back turned to me. Her voice carried the flat, practiced tone she reserved for delivering bad news to clients whose portfolios had underperformed the market index. The facility rules for the Standard Assistance Ward are entirely clear. Residents are strictly limited to 3 standardized plastic boxes of personal effects. Anything beyond that is classified as a fire hazard and must be moved to charity or external storage. And frankly, paying $80 a month for a storage unit in the industrial zone is an unnecessary drain on your remaining pension cash flow. She was speaking about my life as if it were a corporate balance sheet that stubbornly refused to balance. This is always the first identifiable stage of familial liquidation, the systematic reduction of the elderly individual to a manageable, non-disruptive volume of physical matter. They do not begin by taking your home. They begin by taking your sweaters. The green cardigan with the bone buttons was your mother's final gift to me before her admission to the municipal hospital. "Clara," I said. My voice was low, devoid of theatrical pathos or trembling anger, carrying only the dry, rhythmic precision of a person who had spent a lifetime reading aloud from ancient tax rolls during public hearings. "Mother died 12 years ago, Evelyn. Keeping her old, deteriorating wool in a humid room isn't going to alter that biological fact," she replied, folding the garment with an aggressive, tight snap and dropping it into a heavy, black plastic garbage bag labeled "Donate." "We have to look at the macro-level reality here. The facility is raising the base care and nursing fee by 8.5% starting next month. My husband, David, and I are already covering the structural shortfall out of our post-tax income. With our eldest daughter's tuition at the preparatory academy rising by 5% this semester, we simply have to eliminate unnecessary expenditures wherever they occur. This was the narrative framework she had meticulously constructed over the 3-hour drive to the facility to justify her choices. In behavioral psychology, this is known as altruistic rationalization, the process by which an individual convinces themselves that an act of personal convenience or cruelty is actually an act of fiscal necessity performed for the protection of their immediate family unit. What Clara omitted from her verbal calculations was the brand-new luxury plug-in crossover vehicle currently parked in the facility's visitor lot, its metallic paint catching the gray afternoon light, or the high-resolution vacation photographs from a resort in Cabo that her husband had accidentally broadcast to the extended family group chat the previous Tuesday afternoon. The structural friction between myself and my daughter's family had not appeared overnight. It had begun exactly 89 days earlier when the City Council quietly approved the West Side Urban Redevelopment Initiative. To the casual reader of the local newspaper, it appeared to be a routine, progressive urban renewal project, slum clearance disguised as sustainable development. To my son-in-law, David, who had managed to secure an unsalaried seat on the regional planning board through his political connections, it was the culmination of 3 years of private, undocumented negotiations with a real estate investment trust called Prime-Vanguard Holdings. David arrived at the facility later that afternoon, his long nylon raincoat slick with the gray, soot-heavy city deluge that had been falling since dawn. He did not take the coat off. He remained standing by the heavy fire door of my room, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets, a physical manifestation of a man who considered his mere presence in a municipal care home to be a form of high-value charity for which he should be thanked. "Evelyn," David said, nodding once without making direct eye contact. His eyes scanned the small room, noting the peeling laminate on the desk and the small puddle of water forming on the windowsill from the leaky frame, before his gaze settled on the heavy, green steel lockbox that sat beneath my bed frame. "Did Clara fill you in on the independent appraisal we ordered for the old house on Elm Street?" "She mentioned you found an interested party," I said, keeping my hands perfectly still on my knees. "Not just an interested party. We have a formal, unconditional cash offer from Prime-Vanguard's holding company," David said, stepping 2 paces closer into the room. His rubber-soled loafers squeaked loudly against the industrial linoleum, a sound that always signaled his transition into his negotiator persona. "They are buying up the entire residential block to clear the ground for the new commercial transit corridor. It's an incredible stroke of luck for us. But their legal department flagged an old encumbrance during the preliminary title search, a drainage and infrastructural easement from June 1978. It runs directly through the center of your plot, right under the old garage." He pulled a document from his breast pocket, a standard quitclaim deed, printed on heavy bond paper, prepared with the distinct haste of a man whose personal financial survival depended on a quick escrow closing. "The problem is," David continued, his voice taking on an artificial warmth that was entirely transactional, "the original municipal file regarding that easement is entirely missing from the city's digital archive. It's a blank space in the computer system. The current registrar, a guy named Henderson, says that without a formal, notarized release from the historical registrar of record, the title insurance company will not clear the transaction. The sale is completely stalled until we get that signature. The current registrar is a political appointee whose father owns 3 car dealerships in the Eastern District," I remarked, looking down at the legal text of the quitclaim. "Mr. Henderson wouldn't know how to locate an undigitized, cross-reference file if his entire career depended on it. He relies on the search bar, and the past does not live in a search bar." "Exactly," David smiled, exposing his teeth in a way that did not alter the coldness of his eyes. "Henderson's an idiot who got the job because of his family's campaign contributions. But he did say that if you, as the former senior registrar who signed the original 1978 entry, sign this clarifying affidavit stating that the easement was formally abandoned during municipal administrative reorganization of 1991, the city will clear the cloud on the title immediately. It's a pure formality, Evelyn. A single signature, and we close the escrow by Friday afternoon. That cash will completely secure your private care fund here for the next 10 to 15 years. He was lying with a high degree of professional confidence. I knew the 1978 easement entry intimately because I had written it in the master ledger during the Great Spring Flood, using an archival fountain pen because the electricity in the courthouse had been cut off by 4 feet of river water. It was not an abandoned formality. It was an active, underground flood mitigation channel that connected the municipal storm drains to the lower valley. It was designed to act as a pressure valve. If Prime-Vanguard poured 3,000 tons of concrete over that channel to lay the foundations for their commercial high-rises, the next major storm would submerge 80 low-income, working-class homes in the lower valley under 4 feet of toxic, backflowing sewage. "I cannot sign this affidavit, David," I said, my voice remaining entirely flat. The 1978 easement was never abandoned during the 1991 reorganization. I specifically withheld it from the deletion schedule because it is the only thing preventing structural subsidence and flooding in the lower district. David's transactional smile vanished instantly, replaced by the sharp, impatient irritation of a 30-something executive who was accustomed to buying or bullying compliance from elderly relatives. He stepped close enough that I could smell the stale coffee and mints on his breath. "Evelyn, let's stop playing the retired public servant game for 5 minutes and look at the actual reality of your situation," David said, his voice dropping into a harsh, controlled whisper. "You don't live in a historical preservation society anymore. You live in a private facility that costs this family $6,200 every single month. The Elm Street house is your only remaining asset of any measurable value. If this corporate sale falls through because you're obsessed with some ancient, undigitized, bureaucratic technicality, Claire and I are pulling our financial supplementary support immediately. You will be transferred to the state-run facility in County Line by the 1st of the month." He paused, letting the implication hang in the damp air of the room. "The place out in the valley," he continued, ensuring each word hit its target. "The one they investigated last year for understaffing. The place where they have 4 beds to a room behind a plastic curtain and 1 nurse on duty for 55 advanced patients. Think about the physical reality of that facility before you get sentimental about 30 inches of old drainage pipe under a concrete slab." The final confrontation did not take place within the familiar boundaries of room 214. It occurred 48 hours later in the main executive boardroom of Prime-Vanguard Holdings on the 20th floor of the City Center Tower, a building constructed entirely of smoked glass, brushed steel, and hidden structural flaws that I had recorded in my ledgers during its construction in 1986. David had arranged the meeting under the pretense of mediating a complex family legal matter with municipal input, utilizing a private non-emergency medical transport van to move me from the facility as if I were a piece of heavy, archaic furniture to be introduced as evidence in a property dispute. Clara sat directly beside him at the massive, polished mahogany table, her face set in a rigid mask of defensive resentment, her fingers constantly twisting the strap of her leather handbag. Across from us sat Donald Vance, the managing partner of Prime-Vanguard, a man whose flawless dental work and tailored Italian suit suggested a life entirely insulated from the physical consequences of his financial decisions. Next to him sat Henderson, the current municipal registrar, who looked extraordinarily uncomfortable, his silk tie too wide for his narrow neck and his eyes darting toward the exit door every time the air conditioning shifted. "Mrs. Thorne," Donald Vance began, opening a sleek, black leather folder with his manicured hands. His voice was smooth, carrying the exact cadence of a corporate executive who had never had a credit card application rejected or a planning permit denied. "Your son-in-law has indicated that you have some lingering historical reservations regarding the engineering status of the West Side parcel. We pride ourselves on being a community-oriented development firm. To show our good faith, we've added a 5-figure historical consulting fee to the final closing contract for your direct assistance in resolving this administrative bottleneck." He pushed a thick, cream-colored folder across the polished wood. Inside was a cashier's check made out directly to Clara and David's Family Asset Trust. It was a bribe executed with perfect corporate legality, a transfer of funds designed to wash away the guilt of the children while buying the compliance of the parent. "The file isn't missing from your archive, Mr. Henderson," I said, ignoring the folder entirely and addressing the young man who now sat in my old chair at the county office. "It was removed from the active digital migration schedule in the autumn of 2004 because it contains the original engineering blueprints for the municipal water table intersection. You didn't find it on your screen because you didn't look past the preloaded digital database. It is currently located in the sub-basement vault of the old courthouse, stored under the historical index for the Department of Public Works." Henderson's face flushed a deep, blotchy red, his fingers twitching against his leather portfolio as he looked at his phone for support. "Mrs. Thorne, with all due respect to your years of service, that sub-basement vault was permanently sealed after the Environmental Protection Agency issued the asbestos remediation order in 2011. The city formally considers those physical records to be legally obsolete and non-binding. An administrative record is only obsolete when the physical reality it describes ceases to exist, young man," I replied, my voice cutting through the boardroom's expensive silence like a rusty blade. "The water table is still beneath the street. The overflow channel is still functioning. If you allow this firm to drive structural piles into that specific coordinates, you will rupture the main brick conduit that was laid down in 1894. David slammed his open palm onto the mahogany table, the sound cracking through the room and causing Clara to jump in her chair. "That's enough of this performance, Evelyn. You're 81 years old. You're living on old grievances, bitterness, and spite. You don't represent the city anymore. You don't represent the records office. You don't represent anyone but your own stubbornness. If you don't sign that quitclaim affidavit today, we're going to file a petition in probate court tomorrow morning to seek a formal declaration of cognitive incompetence. Clara is your primary medical and legal health proxy. We'll have a probate judge sign that deed over your head before the week is out, and you'll be watching the sunset from State Cot in County Line." Clara did not protest. She kept her eyes locked onto the polished wood of the table, her absolute silence serving as the final, necessary confirmation of the domestic conspiracy. This was the absolute climax of their generational strategy, the total erasure of my legal and cognitive identity to facilitate a real estate transaction that would clear their personal credit lines. In the field of records management, there is a fundamental rule. The original document always outlives the summary. I did not yell, and I did not reach for my handkerchief. Instead, I reached into the deep pocket of my old, oversized wool cardigan, the one Clara had missed during her rapid sorting of my wardrobe, and pulled out a small, yellowed piece of tri-folded paper. It was not a deed, a map, or a contract. It was a certified carbon copy of a municipal treasury bond receipt dated October 12, 1982, bearing the purple ink stamp of the county auditor's office. "In October of 1982, I said, my voice steady, measured, and entirely free of the typical cadences of an elderly person pleading for mercy, the 3 parcels of land that Prime-Vanguard is currently attempting to acquire for private commercial development were purchased by the municipality using funds from the Clean Water Infrastructure Bond Act. Under Section 14, Paragraph C of the Active City Charter, which has never been amended or repealed, any real property acquired by this city via public environmental bonds is held in perpetual public trust. It cannot be sold, transferred, or leased to a private commercial entity without a unanimous 2/3 majority vote of the citizens at a general municipal election." The room became extraordinarily quiet. The only audible sound was the faint, rhythmic clicking of Donald Vance's expensive mechanical watch and the low, distant hum of the server racks behind the drywall. "What exactly is she talking about, Henderson?" Vance asked, his voice losing its smooth, executive texture and becoming sharp, cold, and immediate. His eyes cut toward the young registrar like 2 pieces of flint. Henderson's hand was shaking perceptibly as he tapped his fingers against his tablet screen, his brow furrowing as he tried to access a database that did not contain the information he needed. I'd have to check the historical bond ledger from the pre-digital era. But those files are. In the sub-basement vault. I finished for him, my eyes locked on his. Stored under Box 42, labeled Bond Issue 1982, Environmental Drainage Allocation. Furthermore, the deed to my personal house on Elm Street, the property that my daughter and son-in-law are currently attempting to sell to your corporation for $1.2 million, contains a reciprocal restrictive covenant linked to that bond. The house was built on the boundary line to act as a caretaker's plot for the municipal drainage system. If the public land cannot be legally sold to a private entity, your entire master contract for the West Side Transit Corridor is void from the beginning. It is an illegal agreement under state land law. David stood up so quickly his heavy leather chair skidded backward into the glass wall behind him. His face was a dark, dangerous purple, the corporate veneer completely stripped away to reveal the raw, terrified panic of a middle-aged man facing financial ruin. "You old bitch," David shouted, his voice cracking as he pointed a trembling finger across the table. "You think you can ruin this for us? We owe over $340,000 on our agency's secondary line of credit. We've already spent the advance payment. You're going to destroy our children's future over 40 years of bureaucratic garbage." "I didn't destroy your financial position, David. Your personal spreadsheet did that long before I arrived in this room," I said, carefully folding the yellowed receipt and placing it back into the pocket of my sweater. "You assumed that because an individual is old, their functional knowledge has expired and their records have turned to dust. But a registrar's job is not to be polite. A registrar's job is to remember exactly what the buyers and the borrowers choose to forget. The structural collapse of the West Side Urban Redevelopment Initiative was not a grand, public scandal reported on the evening news. It was a quiet, internal corporate hemorrhage that took exactly 6 months to fully execute its destruction. Prime-Vanguard Holdings withdrew their commercial purchase offer within 48 hours of their senior legal team verifying the validity of the 1982 bond restriction in the courthouse basement. The sheer financial risk of a massive class action injunction from the homeowners in the Lower Valley, combined with a clear municipal title violation, made the entire West Side project toxic to institutional investors. Without the massive cash injection from the property sale to clear his outstanding business debts, David's real estate consulting firm defaulted on its primary operational loans by the end of the fiscal quarter. The luxury plug-in crossover vehicle that Clara had parked so proudly in the facility lot was quietly repossessed in mid-November. A small, silent humiliation witnessed only by the 2 neighbors who watched the flatbed tow truck pull it from their suburban driveway in the cold, gray light of a Tuesday morning. Clara called my room exactly once in January, her voice sounding brittle, dry, and incredibly old. She spoke for 3 minutes to inform me that they were selling their suburban home at a massive loss to avoid a formal corporate bankruptcy filing, and that they would be moving into a rented 2-bedroom apartment near the rail yards. She did not ask about my cardigans, and she did not ask if I needed more tea. I was not transferred to the state-run facility in County Line. 1 week after the boardroom meeting, the chief legal counsel for the municipal district sent a senior investigator to room 214 at Golden Vistas. The city had realized that Henderson's total inability to navigate the historical archives had left over 30 major commercial properties improperly flagged, exposing the city to millions of dollars in potential title lawsuits. They offered me a formal, part-time position as an independent archival consultant for the Records Bureau. My monthly salary is not grand by corporate standards, but it is paid directly into a private bank account that Clara has no legal authority to access. It is more than enough to cover the 8.5% increase in my care fee without ever needing her signature on a supplementary check. I still sit in my wingback chair in room 214, watching the autumn rain streak the glass. The facility management finally hired a commercial contractor to repair the structural flashing above the 2nd floor last month. They did not do this out of kindness or sudden respect for the elderly. They did it because a triple certified notice of municipal code violations was delivered directly to their regional director's home address, signed by the senior consultant for the Municipal Records Bureau. The younger generation handles time as if it were an active enemy to be outrun. and old age as if it were a cognitive disease that renders the human mind smooth, compliant, and useless. They operate under the delusion that progress is simply the act of burying the past under a fresh, unthinking layer of poured concrete and digital code. But they fail to realize that in law, as in engineering, foundations are the only things that ultimately matter. Every commercial building, every sudden family fortune, and every domestic dynamic is constructed upon a historical record that leaves a permanent, indelible footprint in the dirt. My daughter and her husband believe they were merely clearing away useless household clutter when they tried to minimize my existence and strip me of my memory. They did not possess the intellectual capacity to understand that those small, dusty, handwritten records they so deeply despised were the only structural pillars holding their own fragile, debt-fueled world above the rising water. In the final accounting, they were not defeated by an old woman's elaborate vengeance or a shadow network of power. They were simply undone by the cold, unyielding weight of their own unrecorded debts.